Hello and welcome to this awesome GIMP web design project. My name is Chris Parker and you're going to learn how to use GIMP for your web designs, including but not limited to how to easily align different elements with the alignment tool, pro tips for using the text tool, how to create shapes in GIMP and add strokes and drop shadows, how to clip images to a shape, and much more. However, this GIMP web design project is more than just about designing a website in GIMP. I'm also going to share with you pro web design tips, how and why you need to create a great user experience, also known as UX web design, how to stand out among the tens of thousands of other web designers so that you can be a profitable web designer, and much more. Now, all of this is going to be included in the upcoming web design briefing. However, if you're not interested in learning more about the web design business, how to create better designs, and other web design pro tips, and wish to just learn how to use GIMP for web design, then you can skip the briefing of this GIMP web design project and skip ahead about 5 or 7 minutes. Or to find out the exact time of where to skip ahead, check out the timeline or the outline for this GIMP web design tutorial in the description below. So if you're ready, let's do it. All right, so this GIMP web design project is one that I recently did for my own website. And if you'd like to see the live page, you can find the link to it in the description below. Also, if you want to complete this project, you're going to need to download the resources like the grid system and the images used, as well as some other information. And you can also find the link to those resources in the description below. So go ahead, check it out, download them, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, let's first go over the anatomy of this web page, which consists of 4 main sections. So we have the header, the hero section, and then we have the body, which has different sections within it. And then we have the footer at the bottom. Now, this web design is consistent with the rest of my site and has a modern / retro feel to it, at least in the colors that I've chosen for my brand. So it's important when designing a website for your clients to use their existing brand colors and fonts. That is, if you're designing for an existing site and creating new pages or redesigning those pages. Now, if the client is requesting a design for their first website, you're going to need to discuss with them the style they wish to use. Whether it's modern, retro, whether it's going to be image-based or text-based or a combination of the two, you have to find out what style they want for their particular website. And you're also going to have to find out if they've already developed a brand for their business. The colors, the fonts that they like to use, and any other information about their brand to help you build their website. Now, if this is something that they don't have right now, this is a perfect opportunity to upsell your web design services by offering a logo and branding consultation and help them choose the fonts and the colors and everything else that should be part of their branding. Now, your goal may be to be just a web designer. However, you may want to consider offering additional graphic design services to maximize your profit. So it's something to consider. Okay, let's get back to the web design briefing. So the header in most cases will consist of the logo and the navigation. The header can also include other elements. So let's check out this Nike design that I came up with for one of my premium courses. So in the header, we have a lot more information. We have the different branding that Nike has. We also have easy access to log into our accounts, to access our shopping cart. And then in some sites, you will have a secondary navigation. Now, in the case of my website, if we go to the home page here, at the top, I have trending blog posts, a search bar, and social media icons. So the top trending blog post is, in essence, a secondary navigation option. However, for this web page design, I made a decision to hide the secondary navigation, and here's why. For landing pages like this one, the goal of the page is usually to sell a product or service, and it's best to eliminate as many distractions as possible so that your visitor doesn't get the urge to navigate away from the page. Now, this area up here, I would consider a secondary navigation, even though it's not a menu per se, but it still provides secondary navigation options through the trending blog posts. Now, that being said, a lot of marketing gurus even suggest removing all menu options altogether. Now, I've done this in the past, and it's not something that I really like to do anymore. I still like to give my visitors a chance to find what they want, because they don't necessarily want what's on this page all the time. They may want to find out more information about me first before they invest in anything that I have to offer. And that's why I've left the primary navigation on the landing page. So that's something you're going to have to discuss with your clients on whether or not you want to show or hide the primary and secondary navigations. Now, when it comes to designing the header, I try to minimize my headings so that they're not too busy. Now, even though I have a lot of stuff going on in my header with the primary and secondary navigation, I make it easy for my visitors to read that information by changing the background color of the secondary navigation, and that gives separation between the two and makes it less busy. Now, if the secondary navigation, the color of the background, was the same color as the primary, it would be much more difficult to read all that information and it would be too busy. So these are just some of the things you have to consider when designing your headers. You don't want to put too much info in there. And if you do have a lot of stuff, you have to find a way to separate them so you can give importance to one element over another, which is going to make it easier for your viewers to find what they need. All right, so just under the header, we have our hero section. And a hero section should be designed in a way to capture your viewers' attention, whether it's through text, images, or other design elements. It should grab and hold their interest. Then you should ask them to do something, which is known as a call to action. Now, what you ask them to do will be dependent on the goal of that web page. It could be to ask for their contact info, an email address, or maybe to purchase something or something else. But in order to get what your client wants, i.e. the goal of the web page, you have to give them something in return. Because think about it, why should someone give up their email address? Well, if you're going to give them something that solves a problem they are having, then the desire to fix that problem outweighs the fear of being spammed. So in other words, the offer or the call to action has to be irresistible. Creating an irresistible offer will increase the chances your client will reach their desired goal for that web page. Now, if you're able to do that and help your client grow their business, guess who they're going to contact for their next web design project? And who do you think they're going to refer their friends and colleagues to? So the key to growing your web design business is to create websites that help your client grow their business by solving their prospects' problems. Now, you may be wondering, why should I be doing this? I just want to be a web designer. Well, you have to be different. You have to offer something else to be different from the tens of thousands of other web designers. Everybody is doing the exact same thing. Doing web design is easy. Being a profitable web designer in demand for the long term is hard, especially if all you do is what everyone else is doing. So to succeed as a web designer, you must create better web designs by creating designs that are user-friendly, give an irresistible offer that solves problems, and offer additional graphic design services to maximize your profit. If you do that, you'll separate your web design services from all the other thousands and thousands of web designers. Now, even if you're not even interested in doing the additional graphic design projects, branding consultation, logos, marketing services, content writing, and all these other things you can do to help your client succeed, you don't have to. You can still upsell these services and then outsource the projects to other graphic designers. Hire other freelancers to work with you or for you, whatever you want to do. Now, you just want to make sure that if you do this, you're going to outsource it, you're going to manage the project, so you need to make sure that you include a markup for managing the project. All right, so we're getting a little bit off a topic here, but I want to give you as much business insight as I can. All right, so let's get back to the GIMP web design project briefing. And next, we have the body of the web page. Now, the body consists of different sections, and all of those different sections is what makes up the body part of the web page. So the goal of the body section is to sell the products or services being offered. So let's say a visitor visits your client's website, they see the hero section, they see the irresistible offer, but they don't bite. They're not ready to make a transaction with your client yet. So let's think about it. When you're doing a Google search or a YouTube search, why are you doing it? Well, you're doing it because you need something. You have a problem. So right now, you have a desire to be a web designer and you want to use GIMP as your tool for designing websites. However, you have a problem. You don't know how to use GIMP to design websites, which is why you're listening to this GIMP web design tutorial. You have a problem and I'm helping you fix it, hopefully. If not, then you're going to continue your search until your problem is fixed. Now, real quick, before we move on, I would like to ask you for a favor. If I'm helping you solve a problem by learning web design in general, and later on, we're going to learn how to do it in GIMP, please leave a comment below and let me know if this is helping you at all. Please and thank you, and it's much appreciated. All right, so the same principles should be considered for any web design project you do. Prospects are going to visit that web page because it may have a solution to their existing problem. Now, if you provide a great user experience by offering an irresistible offer that solves that problem, then the goal of that page will be reached. And our first shot of solving their problems is through the hero section. However, they may not be ready yet to give out their email address or to do a transaction of some other kind because of several possible reasons. It could be a trust issue. Maybe they don't have enough information yet, or maybe it's something else. And that's where the body section of the web page comes in. It should help sell the product or service and provide some kind of social proof or other forms of trust, or maybe more information on how their problems can be solved with the product or service. So the more information included in the body, the greater chance the prospect will make a final decision in your client's favor. Now, the type of information that we're going to include in our designs is sometimes limited on what our clients give us. A lot of times you're going to find they don't have any written copy at all, which is fine. In that case, you can use what is known as dummy text to fill in the different areas that should contain text. And we're going to talk more about dummy text later on in this GIMP web design project. So for this web design project, I included 3 columns of information in the form of snippets. So a snippet is short, brief descriptions of the product or service. Now, sometimes more information may be required for that prospect to make that final decision on whether or not to do business with your client. So that extra information can either be placed somewhere on the page, maybe lower down, or you can create links in each one of these columns that will then navigate to another page. That's all going to be dependent on the goal of the page being designed. In this case, 3 columns of information is sufficient. However, I've included more info in the form of a video promo, which is down here at the bottom, but I've also included some social proof in the form of testimonials. Testimonials are a very powerful method to show prospects that others have benefited from having that's right, their problems solved. Sometimes this will be enough to make that final transaction. However, I wouldn't rely just on this alone. The more information you can provide, the better chance you can help your client grow their business. Now, like I mentioned, a lot of clients may not have this information as you begin designing the website. They're just going to say something like, I just want this design style. Here are some sites that I like. Can you do something like this? And this is what a lot of web designers are going to say. Mr. and Miss Prospective Client. Yes, that is something I can do. And I've done many websites like this. And here is my portfolio. But guess what? They could be interviewing 5, 10, 20 other web designers that are all saying exactly the same thing. And guess who they're going to choose? Most likely one of the designers with the lowest price. Or if you want to increase your chances of landing the job and at your price, you could say something like this. Mr. or Miss Prospective Client, I have some questions about your web design project. Do you have or have you considered an irresistible offer? Have you considered the best ways to sell your product or services? Have you taken the time to collect testimonials or to set up social proof? And I'm not just referring to social media, but things like guest blog posts or being featured in the media. Now, the reason why I'm asking all these questions, prospective client, these are all things that will help you succeed with your new web page or website. And these are things that I recommend be included in your web design. And these are all things I can help you with. So one last question. Do you want to grow your business? Yes. Well, I'm the web designer for you because not only do I offer web design services, my goal is to help you grow your business through an awesome user experience for the visitors to your website by creating better web designs. All right, so maybe not something exactly like that, but something along those lines. You want to provide information about what you can do that the other web designers are not telling these prospective clients. Okay, so remember when I said we want to solve problems of the visitors visiting a website or web page. And those visitors are visiting a website or web page because they are looking for a solution to their problem. Well, guess what? When you're applying for a web design project, when you're bidding on a project, or any design project for that matter, the person that may hire you or one of the tens of thousands of graphic designers, guess what? They have a problem. Their problem is they need a website or a redesign. But what do they really need? What is the underlying problem? Why do they want that redesign or that new website? Well, if it's an existing site, or maybe they don't have a website, it's not working for them. They're not achieving the goal for that particular website. So the goal of 98% of the websites is to solve a problem. This is what I have to offer, and it's going to solve your problem. So their website isn't doing that yet. It's not solving problems. That's why they want to redesign. They think a new design is going to change things. Yes, it can if it's a really bad 80s style design. But more importantly, it has to be a great user experience. You have to solve a problem. And when you do that, and when you start offering solutions to their visitors and solving their problems, you're going to stand out from the overcrowded arena of graphic designers and web designers in general. And check this out, you'll be able to charge more for your services as well. Okay, so let's let that sink in and then come back next week and re-listen. If you do, you're going to be the, let's say, less than 1% of those listening to this GIMP web design tutorial that does so, which means you're already ahead of the crowd. Anyone can be a web designer. It's easy. It's not really that hard. However, if you want to make it a career and charge what you're worth, then you'll have to work a little harder than everybody else. All right, so enough of that for now. Let's get back to the briefing. We're going to make this real quick and short, and then we'll go ahead and start working on the actual design in GIMP. Now, as you begin adding more and more information to the body section, you want to make it easy for prospects to buy that product or service that solves their problem, or in other words, you want to add call to actions throughout the design. Some pages will have more info than others. Now, for this web design, I included a sign up button in the hero section and another buy now button down near the bottom of the page. If I had more information in here, I might put another one in the middle. But for this web page, I think 2 is sufficient. Now, in addition to all this information, I've also included another call to action or another offer. I've also offered an opportunity to learn how to use GIMP for web design by including this GIMP web design tutorial that you're watching now down here at the bottom of the page. So the thought of doing this is not everybody finds me through YouTube. They may find me through a Google search, Yahoo search, Facebook page, another community, or someplace else, and they'll land on this page not knowing that I have a free tutorial for designing with GIMP. So once they find this particular video, they'll go ahead and go through it, and then if they're interested in more, they'll come back to the web page. Okay, so the final piece of this web page design includes the footer. The footer, like the header, can be something simple like what I have here, or you could design something with more information. So think of the footer as your last chance to give viewers what they need. Maybe this web page in general doesn't offer the solution to their problem. So the footer gives them a chance to find a solution to their problem before they leave the website entirely. So we can include additional links to different parts of the website, a shopping cart option, maybe social media links, and much more. So for this design and for the rest of my site, I chose to keep it simple and only have links to my privacy policy, a support link, social media links, and a copyright notice. All right, so that is it for the GIMP web design project briefing. If you made it this far and you went through all of that, thank you. You are now much farther ahead than a lot of other web designers. We are now going to go ahead and learn how to use GIMP to create this web page design. So I have a question for you. Are you ready? Awesome, let's do it. Now in this GIMP tutorial, I want to go ahead and talk about the grid system. And this isn't going to be a in-depth review of the grid system. I just want to give you some basic information about a grid system and why we need to use one. And a full explanation of the grid system is well beyond the scope of this course, because we could go into the grid system and talk in length for hours just on the grid system alone. So I'm just going to give you some basic information to help you get started with understanding the grid system and how we use it and why we use it as web designers. So the first thing we need to do is we need to open up that grid system template that I provided in the resources. So if you haven't downloaded the resources yet, now would be a great time to do so. Go ahead and find that template and open it up in GIMP. When designing websites, I recommend using a grid system for many reasons. First, one of the easiest ways to control the structure of a web page layout and to achieve a consistent and organized design is to apply a grid system. In the most basic terms, a grid is a structure comprising of a series of guidelines that divide a page into columns or sections. which you can see by turning on your guides because this particular template already has those columns and guides applied. So if we go up to View and scroll down, you can select Show Guides from here, or you can use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control plus the semicolon, or if you're on a Mac, it's Command plus the semicolon. So this structure helps us as web designers to arrange content on the page with the use of evenly spaced columns, which helps us manage the proportions between all the elements of the page to ensure everything is properly aligned and to create a balanced layout. Now, second, websites come in many different sizes, and the device it's being viewed on also come in a variety of different sizes. So it's important to utilize a width that is going to be easily transferable to these different media devices without changing the look of the website by a lot. Otherwise, your site is going to look completely different on, let's say, a 27-inch iMac versus a laptop or a smartphone. Now, the industry standards as far as the size or the width has changed throughout the years. When I designed my first website back in 2001, the standard was 960 pixels wide. And that's because at the time, it was more likely to transfer that website width evenly or better throughout the different devices we had available back then. But throughout the years, we began using different widths based on the devices available at the time. So we started using wider widths, 1200 pixels wide, 1440 pixels wide. But with the advancement of CSS3 and HTML5, it's now much easier to code a website to automatically change sizes based on the device that it's being shown on. Because it wasn't that long ago when we didn't have tablets or smartphones of all different sizes, or even laptops and desktop monitors, which now come in an infinite number of sizes. So our website designs must be able to fit as many possible sizes as, well, possible. But a great web developer can take your web design and code the elements of that web page, the images, graphic elements, text, and more to resize automatically based on the device it's being viewed on. And they can do that with CSS3, HTML5, and there's other types of coding they can use as well. Now, they could even eliminate certain parts of the design elements to not show up on smaller devices. So for example, it may not be necessary to show a large logo on a small smartphone screen. So that's something else to consider when designing for multiple devices, or if you're just designing everything in one grid system like we are here, then you will need to communicate with that web developer not to show certain elements because they're going to be too large, or you can instruct them to make those specific elements smaller if it's still important to the client to have that shown on a smartphone. Now, personally, I still prefer 960 pixels wide for a lot of web designs. However, I don't limit myself to that width. For my own websites, this one included, I like to use a wider design. In this case, 1200 pixels wide. That's just my personal preference for my website. Now, although you do have to consider the width, you also need to consider the number of columns in the grid. So grid systems come in a variety of column options as well. 12 columns is the most popular, but we also have 8 and 15 column grid systems as well. All right, so now the question is, which grid system should you use for your web designs? Well, there is no easy answer. It really depends on the needs of your client, the content, the style of the website that they prefer, and much more. So these are all things you're going to have to explore with your client. But to be on the safe side, I would recommend either 960 pixels wide or 1200 pixels wide. Those are the two most popular types of grid systems that can be coded to many different types of monitors. So for now, what we're going to do is we're just going to use the grid system I provided you, which is 1200 pixels wide with 15 columns. Okay, so the moment you've been waiting for, your entire life is finally here. Well, maybe not that long, but it is time to learn how to design our web pages in GIMP. So here we go. The first thing we're going to work on is creating the header section of the web page design. And what we need to do is we need to create a shape for the background. So let's go ahead and do that by selecting our rectangle select tool, which is located right here, or you can use the keyboard shortcut, which is the letter M. Let's go ahead and make a selection the full width of our document. Now I've gone outside of the document, but that's fine because the selection is confined to the outer edges of the document. Then in the tool options, we're going to set the height or the size to 125. Now we need to create a new layer to put that shape into. Let's call it header background and let's fill it with transparency. Let's click OK. Now we're going to fill it in with the color. So let's go ahead and select our color. So this is the HTML number you need to type in if you want to use the exact same colors. And you may also want to click on this little icon right here because it's going to add that color into this panel of different colors right here. So it's basically saving that color for you so you have easy access to it later on because we will be using it throughout this project. Go ahead and click OK. Now we're going to grab our bucket fill tool. Now my keyboard shortcut for the bucket fill tool is the letter G. It is located right here on our tool panel, and your keyboard shortcut may be different if you haven't changed it. And if you haven't taken one of my premium courses before, you probably haven't changed it. And the reason why I've changed it is because I want to use the same keyboard shortcut that I use in Photoshop for similar tools. And that just makes it easier to go back and forth between the two software programs so that I don't have to worry about memorizing all these different keyboard shortcuts. So in Photoshop, this tool has the keyboard shortcut of the letter G, and I've been using Photoshop a lot longer than GIMP. So it's easier for me to remember the letter G versus Shift plus B, which I think is what this keyboard shortcut is for your GIMP setup. Now in the resources folder, I did include a keyboard shortcut reference file that will show you different keyboard shortcuts for GIMP versus Photoshop in case you want to update to the Photoshop keyboard shortcut as well. And then if we scroll down to page 5 here, I have my top 12 keyboard shortcuts for PC users. And then if we scroll down a little farther, I have them for Mac users as well. So you may want to reference this because throughout this web design project, I am going to be using a lot of Photoshop keyboard shortcuts. And if you want to see the equivalent in GIMP, then just reference this PDF file that's available in the resources folder. All right, so now we can go ahead and fill in that color. And then we need to make a deselection. So if we go up to select and select none, that will remove our selection. Now my keyboard shortcut is right here, which is Command or Control and the letter D, which again is a Photoshop keyboard shortcut. So just reference that if you haven't updated your keyboard shortcuts. All right, now that that's deselected, I'm gonna go to my Move tool, which is the letter V. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off this column grid layer here and move this up. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in as well. And I can do that by grabbing my zoom tool with the letter Z. Now, when you're working as a web designer, you're going to want to learn the keyboard shortcuts. It doesn't matter if you're going to stick with the keyboard shortcuts provided by GIMP or if you want to convert them to Photoshop. Either way, it's imperative to learn your keyboard shortcuts so that you can complete your projects much faster. Now, studies have shown that if you use keyboard shortcuts, you can save 1 hour for every 8 hours worked, which may not seem like a lot, but if you're working based on an hourly pay rate, and if you consider your pay rate to be $50 an hour, then you can save 5 hours a week, which will put an extra $250 a week in your pocket. So it's imperative to learn these keyboard shortcuts, and we're going to be using them a lot in this GIMP web design tutorial. And I'm bringing this up again because I do want to show you how to change your keyboard shortcuts right now. Because one of the things that we have to do with our layers is we need to change the layer boundary of our layers so that we can properly align them later on. Now, we don't need to align this particular background, but if you do have the layer boundary turned on, you're going to see this little yellow and black dotted outline. Now, right now, that outline is the entire size of our document. So if we scroll down, we can see it being outlined all the way around the document. Now, it's not at the bottom, and that's because I moved this particular shape up after I created it. So we want to confine this layer boundary to the actual background itself, so it's 125 pixels tall and not the actual size of the document. So to do that, we're going to come up here to Layer and select Crop the Content. Now, by default, GIMP does not have a keyboard shortcut for this particular action, but as you can see, I added one, Shift plus C. So if I select this, it will then crop that layer boundary to the element or the contents of that layer. And you're going to see the benefit of this later on in this tutorial when we begin to align different elements. So let me show you how to create that keyboard shortcut because we will be using it a lot throughout this project. So we're going to go up to Edit and select Keyboard Shortcuts. In the search option here, we're going to type in Crop to Content. And then we're going to go down here to Layers and click on this option right next to Crop to Content. It probably says Disabled if you haven't set it up previously. So just click on that and then hold down your Shift key and then hit the letter C. And now your keyboard shortcut has been assigned to that specific tool. Make sure you have Save Keyboard Shortcuts set on Exit. So it saves that information. Click Close, and now you can use that keyboard shortcut. Okay, let's go ahead and grab the logo next. I'm just going to click on it from here and drag it over to the document, and it will automatically add it into a new layer. Okay, it's a little large right now, so we're going to go ahead and resize this. Now you may notice that the layer boundary is not aligned to the right here where the graphic ends. So we have to use that keyboard shortcut that we just created in order to crop the boundary. So Shift plus C, and now the layer boundary has been cropped. Now real quick, the layer boundary also affects when you scale or resize a layer, not just when you use the alignment tool. So if I undo this with Command or Control and the letter Z, and then I use the scale tool, it will provide that scale tool along the outer edges of the layer boundary. So now we're going to go ahead and resize this because it's a little bit too tall. And the keyboard shortcut for that is Shift plus S. And then we can either resize by grabbing one of these outer corners or the sides, or we can come up here and type in a specific height and width. So I want to make sure that this option right here is selected and linked together so everything stays in proportion when I resize it. So let's type in 75 for the height, click your tab key, and that's going to give you a preview of the logo before you hit the scale button. So go ahead and click scale, and now the logo has been resized. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my guidelines with Command or Control and the semicolon, because what I want to do is I want to align this logo to the first column on the left side. So if we turn on our columns here, we can see the columns are here. And then between the columns, we have what is known as the gutter. And then we have a little gutter or padding on the outside as well. So we want to keep everything contained within these columns. Now we're going to go ahead and align this logo top to bottom. So let me show you how we do that. So there's actually a couple different ways we can do this, and I'm going to show you different ways throughout this GIMP web design tutorial. So the first way to do it is through a selection. So I'm going to grab my rectangle selection tool with the letter M, and I'm going to make a selection the height of our background here. And then I'm going to grab my alignment tool with the letter A, Or if your keyboard shortcut is different, you can grab it from the toolbar right here. Now in the tool options, we have some options for aligning our layers. So under align here, we have relative to and a bunch of options. So for this one, I want to use selection since I made a selection. I then need to tell GIMP which layer needs to be aligned. So what we need to do is we need to come back over to our logo with the alignment tool still selected and just click on that graphic element. And when you do, you're going to see these little white squares in each corner. So that tells GIMP this layer needs to be aligned to this selection. So we're going to come over here and select Align Middle of Target. When you do, you will then see the logo move into place. And now we have an equal amount of spacing at the top and the bottom. So right now I'm kind of going a little bit slower because I do want to explain all these different tools and options and how to use them. But as we go throughout the course, we are going to be picking up the speed of this tutorial because I will have already explained everything to you. So just bear with me if this is a little bit slow for you. I just want to make sure that you understand all the tools that we're using. Okay, we're now going to work on the navigation or the primary navigation of the header section. So we're going to grab our text tool with the letter T. Now down here in the tool options, I want to go ahead and set up the font for this navigation. So I'm going to use Railway Bold. So this font and any other fonts that we use throughout this project are available in the resources. You just have to follow the link to download and install if you want to use the same font. So the size I'm going to set to 20, and then for the color I'm going to set to white. Okay, all capital letters, and then I'm going to do 8 spaces. 8 spaces again. Now this time I'm going to do 11 spaces because we do have a graphic element right here we need to add to the navigation. I'm going to go ahead and make a selection right here so that I can copy those spaces and then paste them in so I don't have to click the spacebar 11 times. Now you can't see the rest of the navigation right now, but I did finish off the rest of it. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here with the zoom tool. I'm also holding down my Alt or Option key to zoom out. Okay, so I'm going to put this in right about there. And now we need to make those little graphic arrows for the navigation. So let's go ahead and work on that. Now the other thing I like to do is I like to save any work I've done, and I probably do it hundreds of times throughout the project. It may be a couple minutes, maybe 5 minutes, but I don't go very long without saving it because I never know when my computer may blow up or the power may go out, and I don't want to lose any of my progress and start over from something that I did an hour ago. So the keyboard shortcut for saving is Command or Control and the letter S. So let's go ahead and save our progress. And now let's go ahead and select our rectangle selection tool so we can create our little drop down arrow. So I'm just going to make a selection, and then in the tool options, I'm going to set the size to 50 by 50. Let's go ahead and create a new layer called drop down arrow. Fill with transparency and click OK. Now I just want to explain what I'm doing with all the layers in regards to naming them. We want to make sure that we're naming our layers so we know what that particular layer is about. Now at this point, I've already renamed a couple of layers, and I just like to name my layers so that I know what that particular layer is all about and what it contains, because as we add more and more layers, it's going to get confusing if we don't have some type of organization for our layers. In fact, I like to take my organization to a whole new level by creating grouped layers, which we're going to do once we're done with the header section. So make sure you just name your layers in a way so you know what that particular layer is, because it's not really clear what that particular layer is based on the thumbnail of that layer. So even here, I would probably just rename this logo. So let's go ahead and add a stroke to our selection by going up to Edit and select Stroke Selection. From here, we're going to do a line width of 2. Make sure you have this option turned on, solid color, everything else is fine, and then click stroke. All right, now let's go ahead and deselect Command or Control and the letter D, and we have a little box. What we need to do next is we need to crop the layer boundary, so Shift plus C. And then we're going to select our rotate tool, which is located right here. I've changed the keyboard shortcut for this to Control plus T. From here, I can either click on that particular graphic element and rotate it accordingly, or I can come up here and use the slider or type in a number. So I'm just going to type in 45, click rotate, and we now have our diamond shape. Now we need to crop this or cut off the top part for our bottom arrow. So let's go back to our rectangle selection tool with the letter M, make a selection, and then our keyboard shortcut for cutting is Command or Control and the letter X. Okay, so the top part is now gone. Deselect Command or Control and the letter D, and then crop the layer boundary again, Shift plus C. Now, before we resize this because it is too large, I do want to duplicate this layer because we do have another drop-down arrow down here in the hero section. So we can either do that by clicking on this icon right here to duplicate the layer, or use our keyboard shortcuts, which I have changed, and it's Command or Control and the letter J. So either way, go ahead and duplicate that layer. Let's rename this one Hero Nav. All right, let's go ahead and grab our move tool with the letter V and then just drag it down. And let's go ahead and turn that layer off. I also want to move it to the bottom here below everything else. And then we can grab this layer again. All right, let's resize it with Shift plus S. For the height, we're going to do 10. So that looks good. Click Scale. Let's go ahead and move it over here. I think it might be just a little bit too big, so I'm going to go back to my scale tool again and just resize it here to, let's say, 7. Okay, go ahead and duplicate that layer. And let's go ahead and move them over. So 2 more times. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to design my websites so they are pixel perfect. So in other words, perfect alignment and perfect spacing. So I want to move this particular layer over a little bit, but I can't click on it and select it. And that's because I have Move Active Layer selected. If I select Pick a Layer or Guide, I can click on it and then I can move it over. I'm going to grab my Measure tool, which is located right here, and I'm going to click and drag out so I can find out the amount of spacing between these two elements. If we take a look down here at the bottom of our interface, we can see we have 6 pixels of space between the two. So let's make sure we have the same amount of spacing between all the different elements. So we're going to do 6 pixels again here, and now I can click on my ruler and drag out a guide, and then we have to turn on our guides, and then we can move that particular element into position. So I don't need this guide anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and remove it so it doesn't interfere with our design later on. Now we're going to go ahead and continue doing the measurements for the other 2 elements as well. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here. And the other thing I want to do is I want to group all these different elements now. So let's go up here at the top and select the top layer here and click on this icon right here to create a new layer group. Let's call it Navigation. And then we're just going to click on a layer and drag it into that grouped layer. Okay, so this makes things a lot much neater and much more organized, because if you don't group your layers, you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of different layers in your layer panel. And yes, you can do other things like add a color label to the layers, but I find adding grouped layers for different elements cleans up the layer panel and makes it easier to find what I need when I need it. All right, let's go ahead and turn our guides back on because we do want to make sure that this is aligned to the last column on the right side. So let's grab our move tool, make sure we have move the active layer selected, and just move it into place. Now with our rectangle select tool, we'll go ahead and make a selection. Let's grab our alignment tool with the letter A and then click on the navigation. Make sure relative to is still set to selection and align to middle of target. Okay, deselect. Looks like I have a little bit of extra space over here on the right side. So something happened when I moved it earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my move tool, select pick a layer or guide, and then I'm just going to use my arrow keys to move it over to align to the left side. Let's check out the right side, and it's perfectly aligned now. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out with Command or Control and 0, and that's going to zoom all the way out so that my document fits in my interface. And guess what? We are now done with the header section, but we do have one quick last thing to do. Let's group everything into a grouped layer called header. All right, so that's it for the header. Next up, we are going to work on the hero section. Before we get into the hero section, I just want to share something else with you real quick, and that is what happens when a person hovers over a link on the web page. So you may have something happen or show up when a person hovers over a button or maybe a menu item. So these are known as a hover state. When you hover over it, something happens, and we need to design the web page in a way to show the web developer that when a person does hover over a link, you want the contents to either change or show different graphic elements. So we want to create a grouped layer called a hover state. In this case, it's a menu hover state. So if we turn this layer on, we will see what the web developer should code for this particular menu when a person hovers over it. So we just have a new pop-up window with a new background color, some text, a divider, and then some arrows here showing that there's additional menu options when you hover over these. So again, I would create additional hover states for these as well. But because I'm not creating a new web page or new website from scratch, this site already exists, so I don't need to recreate this hover state. But I just wanted to share that with you because you will need to create these different hover states for your buttons, your menu navigation items, and any other links that you design on the page. Now, if you want to check out this completed web design, I've included it in the resources folder that you downloaded. All right, so let's go ahead and work on our hero section. Now, when it comes to the hero section, you want to have all the important content above what is known as the fold line. And the fold line comes from the days of newspapers, because when you folded the newspaper in half, you could only see half the content. And on the front page, you wanted the top stories above the fold, and that would help sell that particular newspaper because you couldn't really see anything on the bottom half because it was folded and hidden. So the same concept applies to the hero section. We want all the important stuff above the fold line so that we can keep that person's interest or get them to do something through our call to action. Now, when it comes to the fold line for your web page design, it could range from 500 pixels tall to 1,000 pixels tall, or maybe something else larger or smaller or something in between. It's really hard to define a specific fold line because the fold line on a 27-inch iMac is going to be different than a smartphone because of the size of the monitor or the device. So that's why we like to now design for responsive websites. So if we take a look at my website right now, here's the fold line. We can't see anything below it. And as I begin to resize it, it automatically begins to adjust that fold line so that we can't see anything below it. Now at certain sizes, the navigation button will be hidden, and that's because the site hasn't been coded for this specific width. But as I get down smaller and smaller to the size of a tablet and a smartphone, it will begin showing the content properly for the hero section and not show anything below it, because we want to keep everybody's attention right here. Now, if the hero section doesn't do its job, like we've talked about previously, because the person may need more information, then they can navigate down to get that information. So I'm always asked, where should I put my fold line? I would say between 700 and 1,000 pixels tall, with the intention of having a responsive web page. So for this particular project, let's go ahead and create a fold line that is 1,000 pixels tall. All right, let's go ahead and turn on our guides with Command or Control and the semicolon key, and then click on your top ruler here and drag a guide down to 1,000 pixels. Now, in order to get it exactly where you want it, take a look down here and you're going to see some numbers. And when I hover over that guideline, we can see -76 and 1,000. So that's basically where my cursor is for the mouse. If I move over, the minus changes to -8. And now I'm at, let's get it to 0 right there. And I am on the left-hand side of the document at 998 pixels tall. So that's a way to see exactly where you're placing your guidelines. So right now it's at 1,000 pixels tall. So if we want to create a vertical guideline, we can do the same thing. If we want to place it exactly at the left side, but 50 pixels of padding, then we can use that little numerical display in our interface down there in the bottom left. All right, let's go ahead and grab our hero image. Just click and drag it onto the document, and it will be added into a new layer. We need to pull it out of this header group because I don't want it in there, and I actually want it below the header. Okay, I'm going to turn off my guides just for a second, and I'm going to grab my move tool because I want to move this up just a little bit. Actually, let's turn the guides back on, and I'm just going to keep moving this up just a little bit more. So maybe right about there. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to crop this image so that it's inside of this hero section. So we can see it's extending beyond the hero section right now, and that's not what I want. So we could come in with our crop tool, which is the marquee tool, and then using the keyboard shortcut to cut it, which is Command or Control and X, to remove this part of the image. But what if I decide, or maybe my client comes back and says, can we move the picture up or down? Well, I just destructively removed a part of that image, and I have to find that original image again and start over. But what I recommend doing is working non-destructively so that you can go back and easily fix the image to reposition as needed. And to do that, we're going to first grab our rectangle select tool with the letter M, and we're going to make a selection in the hero section just like that. And then we're going to come over here and add a layer mask to our hero image layer. You want to make sure you have selection selected and then click add, and boom, our image is now cropped. And you can see over here where that image has been cropped because the areas in black remove, white adds. So if we want to change this in the future, all we have to do is right click and select delete layer mask, and then we can reposition as needed, and then we'll just add the layer mask again. Now, the one thing we want to do is we want to make it easy for people to read the content on our site. So in the design, I created a overlay to make it easier to read our call to action, because without that overlay, it's very hard to read that content. So we want to create a great user experience and make it easy for people to read and find what they need. So let's go ahead and create that overlay. So to do that, we're just going to create a shape. Let's turn our guides back on, and let's create a shape the size of the hero section. Let's create a new layer called Hero Overlay. Fill it with transparency, click OK. Let's go ahead and choose our color, which is this blue color right here. Now, if you don't have this particular color saved because you didn't click on this little icon, you can come over here and grab your eyedropper tool and then select the color from the header section up here. Okay, now that we have that color, let's go ahead and grab our bucket fill tool and go ahead, fill it in and deselect. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and drop the opacity of this layer down to 97. So there we go. We now have our overlay. Let's go ahead and add some text now. Let's change the font size to 36 and white. I'm also going to change this to ultra bold. And I'm going to go ahead and type out the headline. Let's go ahead and move it into position here. We're not going to align everything yet. We'll do that in just a second. All right, let's change the font to just Railway, and the size is going to be 14. Let's type out our sub headline. All right, let's go ahead and align this content to the center of the document. So I'm going to grab my headline here first and do that one. We're going to make a selection with Command or Control and the letter A. Now that selects the entire document. But what we can do with our alignment tool is click on the headline and then make sure relative to selection is selected and then align to center of target. And then go ahead and click on your subtitle and do the same thing. Okay, let's go ahead and deselect with Command or Control and the letter D. All right, so we're gonna go back to our rectangle select tool so we can create our call to action button. So we're going to create some rounded corners. So go ahead and go to Tool Options, click on Rounded Corners and set it to 10. And then for the size, let's go ahead and make a selection first. For the size, we're going to do 200 by 60. Now, as far as the color goes, I want a green color, which will be this HTML number right here. So go ahead and type that in. And then we need to create a new layer. Let's call it CTA button, which is called action button. And then with your bucket fill tool with the letter G, go ahead and fill that in and deselect. Okay, let's put in some text in here. I'm going to go back to our ultra bold. Let's do 26 for the size and white. All right, now I want to go ahead and align Sign Up Now directly in the center of our button. But before we do that, we actually need to go back to our CTA button and crop the layer boundary. So let's do that with Shift+C. And now I want to show you a different way that we can align our content. So let's grab our alignment tool with the letter A and click on Sign Up Now. Now those 4 squares again show that we have that particular layer selected, and that lets GIMP know we want to align that with, what do we want to align it with? Well, let's align it with this button here, which is currently selected in the layer panel. So we can come down here to relative to and change it from selection to active layer, and now GIMP will align it to that particular layer. So that's just another way of aligning different elements. Let's go ahead and take these 2 layers and create a new layer group called CTA button. Now we can take both of these layers and with our alignment tool, select it and then use Command or Control and the letter A to align it directly in the center of our document. But we need to go back and make sure we change active layer to selection, and then we can align center of target. Okay, let's deselect. Let's go ahead and put our title and subtitle in a new layer group as well. And then I just want to tighten up our content just a little bit to make it easier to read. So I'm going to go back to our subtitle here, and I want to move that. I'm going to go ahead and grab my move tool and select pick a layer or guide, click on it, and then I'm going to use my arrow keys to move it up. So I want that a little bit closer to the title versus the button itself. Okay, let's go ahead and zoom out. And now let's create our navigation button down here at the bottom. We already started on it. We just need to move it above the image and the hero overlay so we can actually see it. All right, let's go ahead and create our circle shape for our button. We're going to grab our ellipse select tool. Let's also create a new layer called nav circle button. Let's create a shape and let's do 70 by 70. And now let's add our stroke by going up to Edit, Stroke Selection, and let's do a line width of 4. Okay, deselect, and let's go ahead and move this into position. Let's crop the layer boundary with Shift plus C, and then let's take our arrow and make it smaller, so Shift plus S, and I'm just going to drag a corner down to resize it so it's about 25 for the height. Now, before we commit to that actual size, you can actually click right in the center here and then move that arrow into position. So this is helpful in case you're not quite sure if it's the right size yet. So now that it's in position, I do like this size, so I'm going to go ahead and click Scale. I'm just going to go ahead and grab my Move tool so I can just move it over and up just a little bit. Okay, let's put that in a new grouped layer. Let's go ahead and move this down as well. All right, I just need to align it now. So I'm going to select all, Command or Control, and the letter A. Select your alignment tool with the letter A, click on the button, and align center of target. Okay, let's deselect. All right, so looking good so far. We just have one thing left to do, and that is I want to align this content evenly between the top of the hero section and the top of our navigation button. So to help us do that, we're going to create a new layer group to take the titles and the button and place them inside of that layer group. Now we can grab our rectangle select tool and make a selection right here. Let's grab our alignment tool with the letter A, click on the content, and then align middle of target. All right, so we now have a pixel perfect design for the hero section. Everything is properly aligned and centered. And we have one last thing to do, and that's to put all this content into a new layer group called Hero. So let's go ahead and do that. Actually, we have one last thing to do in our hero section, and that is I want to add a drop shadow to our call to action button and the text. Now check this out. If you're not quite sure about using grouped layers yet, let me show you something real quick. Now, as you can see, we have cleaned up the layer panel and we don't have hundreds of layers littered in our layer panel, and it's a lot neater. It's a lot more organized. But here's another reason why you may want to use layer groups, because if you want to find something specifically to work on, you can quickly access that specific layer by using our Move tool, and then make sure you have Pick a Layer or Guide selected. And then when you click on that element that you want to work on, GIMP is going to automatically open up that grouped layer that it's in, and it's going to automatically select the layer that you clicked on. How cool is that? So not only are we organized, but we can easily find a specific layer that we need to work on. All right, let's go ahead and add our drop shadows. But first, we need to change the layer boundary of our button and our text. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to see that drop shadow because it's being cropped to the content right now. So to fix that, we need to go up to Layer and select Layer to Image Size, and that's going to change the layer boundary so that it fits the entire size of the document. So now we can go up to Filters, Light and Shadow, and select Drop Shadow to add that drop shadow. So I already have one now based on the defaults that GIMP provides. We can also click on Preview to see the before and after. So what I want to do is I want to create a harder edged shadow, and I also want to move the shadow up and to the left. So let's adjust the blur radius first to around 1.5. You can set it to whatever you want. And that creates that harder edge. We now need to move it up and to the left. And right now we have the X and Y, or the horizontal and vertical axis right here, locked together so that when I adjust one, both of them are adjusted at the same amount. So I'm going to place it maybe, I don't know, right about there. And then if you want to adjust these individually, you can click on this link icon and then you can adjust it accordingly to whatever you want to do. Now, the thing I want to do is I want to use this exact same drop shadow for our text as well. So the easiest way to do that versus writing all this content down is to create a preset. So click on this plus icon and let's give it a name. Now I have a couple in here already, so I'm just going to do 05. Click OK. And then if you click in here, you will see all your saved drop shadows. It's also going to list your last used drop shadows. Now we need to come over here and select our Sign Up Now layer, and we need to go up to Layer and select Layer to Image Size. Now check this out. We can now apply this drop shadow simply by using a keyboard shortcut, which is Command or Control and the letter F. Bam! How awesome is that? I love it. So if we take a look up here under Filters, we can see an option that says Repeat Drop Shadow, and there's the keyboard shortcut right there. All right, so our hero section is done. Let's go ahead and get started on the body content of our web page design. The first part of our body section is going to include a title, subtitle, and 3 columns. Now, because we have a 15-column grid system, we could take these 3 columns and spread them along 5 columns each. But that would require a much larger image for each one of the columns. That's not something I wanted to do. That's just a design choice. So what I've done is I've taken the 2 outer columns and spread them out among 4 columns each. And then the middle column I aligned directly in the center, which leaves a column on the left and right sides of the grid system. So let's go ahead and create this section. And the first thing we're going to do is create a new layer so we can create our body background. Let's grab our rectangle select tool. Let's size it 1440 for the width. And let's do 700 for the height. I also need to move mine over just a little bit because the selection moved over to the left based on the size I typed in. All right, now for the color, I'm going to choose a nice tan color. I'm going to use this hexadecimal number right here. Let's go ahead and fill that in with our bucket fill tool and deselect. Let's also crop the layer boundary with Shift plus C. Okay, I'm just going to move this up so it aligns with the bottom of the hero section. And now we need to add some text. So let's grab our text tool with the letter T. I'm going to use Railway Ultra Bold. For the size, I'm going to do 24. And then for the color, I want this nice blue color that we've been using with the rest of the page design. All right, let's go ahead and add our title. But the problem is we get a little message from GIMP. It says confirm text editing. So the reason why it's doing that is when we added the drop shadow to the sign up now text up here, it converted our text layer to a graphic layer. So it's asking if we want to edit this text here. If we do and click edit, it will convert this graphic layer back to a text layer, but it will remove the drop shadow. Not only that, I don't want to edit this text. I want to create a new layer of text. So the reason why we're getting this message is, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. If we select the Sign Up Now layer, we can see the layer boundary is the size of our entire document. So as soon as I click inside of this layer boundary, GIMP thinks we want to edit that text. So what we need to do is crop the content of that layer with Shift plus C. And now when I click, I get a new layer. So let's go ahead and type out our title and then click your escape key to get out of the text tool. And then we can add our subtitle. So let's go ahead and change this back to railway. And let's do 14 for the size. And then I want to change the color to this dark gray color right here. Okay, let's add our subtitle. Click escape again. Let's go ahead and zoom in just a little bit here. And let's go ahead and make our alignment for each one of these layers. Right now, I have all this information inside of the hero section grouped layers. So I'm going to grab and pull those layers out so I can align them where they need to be. Let's go ahead and close this up. All right, let's go ahead and align our titles. Let's make our selection first with Command or Control and the letter A. And let's grab our alignment tool with the letter A. And then click on your title. The only problem is GIMP is not selecting this layer. What it's actually selecting is, if we take a look, those little white squares are down here in the bottom. And what it's doing is it's selecting the layer group above it, which is the hero section. So when I select the hero group, I'm going to go ahead and deselect here. We can see the layer boundary for the hero section is coming down into this section, and that's why the alignment tool is selecting the hero group and not the text layer that we want. So the easiest and quickest way to fix this is to grab our hero group layer and crop the layer boundary content with Shift+C. Now I can go back to my alignment tool. I'm going to go ahead and select all again. And this time when I click on the title, it's selected. Let's go ahead and align center of target. Let's click on our subtitle and do the same thing. I also want to move the subtitle up just a little bit. So I'm going to use my move tool. I'm going to click on it and then I'm going to use my arrow keys to move it up. Okay, let's deselect. All right, let's go ahead and add our images for the columns. Let's go ahead and create a grouped layer for our title and subtitle. Let's rearrange our images. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my columns here so I can see them a little bit better. I also want to make sure that all my images are in the correct order. Okay, we'll align everything after we get our content added to the columns. Now for this design, I already had the content I wanted to add to the design. So I can simply come over to my word processing software and select that text and add it to the design. But oftentimes our clients are not going to have the content available for us. So in that case, we want to use what is known as dummy text. So dummy text is text that you can use in place of real content because the dummy text is not readable. It's just used as a replacement for that content. So if you do a Google search for dummy text, you will find a variety of text generators that will create that dummy text for you. Now, if you think your client has a sense of humor, you can do something like bacon dummy text. And then instead of having text in, let's say, Latin, the text will be about bacon. So go ahead and check that out. Go ahead and copy some of this text if you want to add some dummy text, or if you want, just come over here, click on the text, select all, and copy with Command or Control and the letter C. And we'll go ahead and add our first column of text. So to create the text box, I'm just clicking and dragging, and then I can paste that information in. Now for this content, I used the font family, Georgia, 14 for the size, and then our dark gray color. Now when it comes to the number of font families I use on a web page, I recommend using a maximum of 3 different font families. So usually I will do one font family for the title, another for the subtitle, and then a third font family for the content. If you start using more than 3 types of font families, it's not going to make your website look as professional, and it's going to make it harder on the viewers to read that content. The other thing I like to do is I like to use a font for the body of the content, or a lot of content like this. I like to use Georgia or Helvetica because it's easier to read at the smaller sizes. Now, when it comes to font families in general and typography in general, we're barely scratching the surface because, again, this is one of those subjects that I could spend a few hours on trying to give you pro tips on how to best use font families or typography. So these are just some small tips that you should know, but you still have a lot to learn about typography in general. The other thing I want to do is I want to make sure my text box here is cropped to the bottom of this paragraph right here. So when I go to align from top to bottom, it's not taking this empty space into consideration. So I'm going to click on the bottom part right here, and then I'm going to drag it up. Once I click my escape key, you will then see the layer boundary cropped to that content. Let's go ahead and turn on our columns so we can properly size our text box across 4 columns. So click inside and drag the right side over to the right side of this 4th column. Okay, let's hit our escape key to get out of there. All right, let's go ahead and add our title now. Let's go ahead and move some of these items down a little bit. Let's center the title as well. So I'm just using my rectangle selection tool. And we also want to make sure we have the columns turned off so we can actually click on the title. Let's change it back to selection and align center of target. Okay, I'm going to put a guide right here above the title so we can align everything else. So to make this easier, let's go ahead and put this in a new grouped layer. I'm going to call it column 1. Then we can go ahead and take this column and duplicate it twice. Let's go ahead and move them over. Let's turn on our guides as well so we can align this exactly where it needs to be. And let's do the second column as well. Now, typically I will update the titles and the paragraphs accordingly if I have the actual content. If not, I will just duplicate the content if I'm using dummy text. In this case, since it's just for practice, we're going to go ahead and leave everything as is. So let's go ahead and align everything accordingly now. I'm going to grab my rectangle selection tool and align my second column here. Let's start with the image and then the paragraph. Okay, let's make sure everything is aligned over here as well. Looks like I need to align my images in the first and third columns. The last thing I want to do is I want to align the images so that they're aligned to the top of the images. So let's take a look at our first image here by selecting that image layer. And we can see that the layer boundary is larger than the image. So I'm going to go ahead and crop the content with Shift+C. And I probably have to do that for the other images as well. So let's go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and clean up the names of my layers as well. I'm also going to rearrange each one of the layers. So let's call this column 2 and column 3. Okay, now is probably a good time to save, so Command or Control and the letter S. All right, let's go ahead and group our layers now. We're going to start off with the columns first. Looks like I forgot to put the images in with these grouped columns as well, so let's go ahead and put those inside as well. Okay, I want to close this gap right here. It's too big of a gap. I want to bring it in a little bit closer with everything else. Actually, I want to go ahead and take a measurement from here to apply between the titles and the content. So let's grab our measure tool and let's go ahead and make a measurement. So I have 38 pixels. So I want to go ahead and add the same amount of space between the titles and the content. Okay, the last thing to do is to group everything and align to the background. All right, before we put the body background in the grouped layer, we first need to align the existing group layer to the background. So make sure you have your body background selected, grab your alignment tool, select that grouped layer, and then change relative to active layer and align middle of target. Okay, everything is perfectly aligned. We can now go ahead and put this inside, and we are all done with the first section of our body. So next up, we are going to work on the review section of the body. So before we can add our next section, we need to increase the size of the canvas. Our document is too small right now, so let's go ahead and increase it by going up to Image, select Canvas Size, make sure it's unlocked right here, and then for the height, we're going to do 3800. Click Resize. Now, although that did resize our canvas, we now have transparency on the background. So I don't want that. I want to fill it in with white. So the easiest way to do that is to make sure our background layer is selected, and then grab your scale tool, make sure it's unlocked, type in 3800 for the height, and click Scale. That also increases the layer boundary for it as well. So let's go ahead and create a new background layer called Review Background. Let's grab our rectangle selection tool and let's go ahead and size it to 1440 by 850 tall. Now, previously I've shown you how to click and move that selection around because I do have some extra white space right here. But if we want to make sure that it's precisely where we want it, we can come into the tool options here, and under position, we can see that it's set to -30 for mine. If I set this to 0, click the tab key, it's then going to move that selection, and now I know it's perfectly aligned with the left and right side of the document. Now for the color, I'm going to use this dark orange color, and here's the hexadecimal number for that. And let's go ahead and fill that in with our bucket fill tool. Command or Control and the letter D to deselect, Shift plus C to crop the layer boundary. Back to the Move tool, and I'm going to go ahead and move this into position. Just going to zoom in, make sure I put it exactly underneath the last section. So that looks good right there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and save it with Command or Control and the letter S. I'm then going to grab my text tool. For the text, we're going to use Railway extra bold. We're going to size it to 40 and white for the color. So in all caps, I'm going to do Rave Reviews. Click the Escape key. Let's move this up. Select all, Command or Control and the letter A. Let's grab our alignment tool with the letter A. Click on it. And then we're going to align to our selection here to the center of target. All right, deselect once again. Okay, let's go ahead and turn on our column layer here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 3 reviews and spread them across 5 columns. So right now my columns end right here, and that's because the height of that particular layer is based on the original document. So let's go ahead and grab our column grid layer, our scale tool with Shift plus S, and let's type in 3800 for the height. Okay, back to the rectangle selection tool. Let's go ahead and make a selection 5 columns wide. And then for the height, we're going to set it to 600. Okay, I'm going to come down here and select my review background layer because I want to create a new layer above it. And when I click on new layer, and I'm going to go ahead and call this review background 1. And when I click OK, it's going to apply that new layer above the layer that was selected. So sometimes that's easier than just picking any random layer and then having to move it after. Just another quick tip. All right, let's grab our bucket fill tool with the letter G. Let's fill it in with white and deselect. Okay, let's go ahead and move this particular layer up. I also want to crop the layer contents, so Shift plus C. Let's make sure it's all aligned properly. Sometimes it's kind of hard to see with that grid column on, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. So that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and zoom back out. I'm going to turn off my guides. All right, let's go ahead and grab our first image for this first review. Let's go ahead and move this up. It's looking a little bit too large, so let's grab our scale tool with Shift plus S. And then for the width and the height, we will do 100. All right, let's go ahead and align this now. Let's go ahead and select this layer here, Review Background 1. We're going to grab our alignment tool, click on it, and we're going to change to Active Layer and Center Middle of Target. All right, let's go ahead and grab our text tool so we can add some text. I'm going to go ahead and click in here, copy it all with Command or Control and the letter C. And then here's a quick tip. If you want to make your text box a specific size, you will see when you click and drag the size of that box right down here at the bottom of the interface. So I'm going to click and drag out. And what I want is 346 by 365. The only problem is it's going to take me a few minutes here to try and get this dialed in exactly the way I want it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit escape so I can get out of there. And I'm going to grab my rectangle select tool instead. And then from here, I can create the exact size I want, 346 by 365. And then I can grab my text tool and draw my box around that outline. How cool is that? I'm going to go ahead and paste with Command or Control and the letter V. I'm going to go ahead and deselect, which is Command or Control and the letter D. All right, escape again, back to the move tool, and I'm just going to put this into position. I'm going to grab my background layer here again, and then I'm going to click on my text with my alignment tool so I can align it to the active layer center of target. All right, let's create a new group layer for our content here and our image. Okay, we're going to go back to the review background layer. We're going to grab our alignment tool, click on the image, and then this time we're going to align middle of target. So now we have it perfectly centered with our background. Let's go ahead and put review background 1 layer in the group layer, and let's also move that layer down a little bit so we can see our content. Okay, so we are almost done with our first review. Now we could leave a nice square image, but for fun, let's change it to a circle instead of a square. So let's go back inside our grouped layer here. We're going to select Review Image 1. Let's go ahead and zoom in as well. So let's go ahead and select our ellipse tool. Let's make a selection. And then for the size, we'll do 90 by 90. Let's go ahead and grab that selection and put it on the inside right here. And now we're going to clip this image to this selection. So this is how easy it is to do. We're going to come over here. We're going to select Add a Layer Mask. Make sure you have Selection selected and click Add, and boom. We now have our image cropped to the circle. Okay, let's deselect. Let's go ahead and zoom out and take a look at our handiwork here. So that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and take this Review 1 grouped layer and duplicate it twice. Let's go ahead and rename these. Let's go ahead and move them over with our Move tool. Actually, let's turn on our column grid layer first so we can see where we're moving everything. So we have Review 2 selected, and then we can go ahead and move this over. Let's grab Review 3 layer, move that one over as well. Let's turn off this layer. Let's grab our alignment tool, click, Shift key, then click and click again. Okay, back to active layer and align to the top. I just want to make sure everything is aligned properly. Now our content is a little different for the other two columns. So just like before, I could either keep the content the way it is like this, or I can update that content if I have the content available. So we'll go ahead and do one here real quick. I'm just going to grab my text tool, select all, copy, and then I'm just going to click on this layer, select all, and paste. Let's go ahead and adjust our text layer here. Next, I'm going to grab my background layer here and rescale it. Let's make sure it's unlocked as well. Now I want to make sure I have the same amount of space here and here. So let's go ahead and take a measurement. So I have 60 pixels. Let's add 60 pixels of space here. We want to make sure we're paying attention to the small details so that our web designs are pixel perfect. Otherwise, we're just going to be doing the same thing everybody else is doing. And we want to make sure that our designs are better than everybody else's. So personally, I would go in and I would change the images for these two columns and the content here. And I would also change the content here because I guarantee you most web designers are just copying and pasting that information from one column to another. And when a client sees your portfolio and compares it to all the other web designers they're considering, they're going to notice that you took the time to update each of the different columns with new content and new images. And they're going to see that you're spending a little bit more time and paying attention to the small details. And that could be enough between getting the job or not getting the job. So just keep that in mind if you want to increase your chances of getting the job. Let's go ahead and group these layers now into a new grouped layer called Reviews. Let's go ahead and save it, Command or Control and the letter S. All right, so our review section is now done. We're ready to move on to the next section. Now, real quick, before we begin working on this part of the web design project, I just want to point out that there are some design mistakes in this section. It's kind of hard to see right now, but if we turn the grid system on, it's easier to notice those mistakes. And I'm not going to go over those mistakes right now. We're going to save that till the end, like I had mentioned previously. So instead of re-adding this information from scratch, we're just going to grab the content and move it over to our current working project. And then we'll go over those mistakes later on. This way we can all learn from those mistakes. So let's go ahead and grab our titles and our paragraphs. So to do that, we're just going to grab the layer we want to move, and we're going to click and drag it over the tab of the current project. And when you release, it will be added to the document. Now, right now we can't see it because the text is in white. So let's go ahead and move the rest of the content, and then we'll finish up the section design. Okay, let's go ahead and create the outline for the section. Let's grab our rectangle selection tool. And we're going to create an outline that is 1181 by 550 pixels tall. And that's going to be exactly 15 columns wide. We'll go ahead and center it in just a second. Let's go ahead and create a new layer to put it on. Let's call it Outline. Then we're going to add that stroke by going up to Edit, selecting Stroke Selection. Let's do a line width of 4. But we want to make sure we have the correct color as well. So click on the foreground color here and then select our dark blue color. Go ahead and apply the stroke and deselect with Command or Control and the letter D. Now we need a background for the right column as well. So let's create a new layer again. And then for the size, we're going to do 461 by 550 pixels tall. And then we're going to fill it in with that same blue color. Let's go ahead and crop the content or the layer boundary with Shift plus C. Let's do the same thing for the outline as well. Now, the last thing we need to create for this section is our Buy Now button. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and rearrange this content and place it exactly where it should be, center everything, and make sure everything is properly aligned. So I've already shown you how to do this several times. So I'm going to go ahead and complete this part, and I encourage you to do the same thing. And I will be speeding up this part of the web design project since I've already shown you how to do it. And then we'll finish up the button, and then we'll be able to move on to learning some new things in the upcoming sections. Now that I have everything arranged, you may notice this little black line right here. And I think this is just a bug in GIMP. And if I close this and reopen it, it should disappear. Now, as far as organizing the layers, I put everything in a left column, right column, and a background layer. Now let's go ahead and create our Buy Now button. We're going to do rounded corners with a size of 10. And then for the size of the button, we're going to do 160 by 65. Let's go ahead and create a new layer called Buy Now button. Let's fill it in with our green color here. We're going to use our bucket fill tool. And before we deselect, I want to add a stroke as well. So let's go up to Edit, Stroke Selection. Let's do 2 for the line width, and I want white for the foreground. Okay, go ahead and deselect, and now let's add our text. We're going to do white and a size of 30, and let's also do Railway bold. Okay, let's go ahead and align it to the button now. Let's go ahead and crop the layer boundary for the Buy Now button with Shift plus C. Let's grab our alignment tool and align it to the active layer. All right, let's go ahead and add our drop shadow. We still have our drop shadow available in the filters, so we can use our keyboard shortcut, which is Command or Control and the letter F. The only problem is we have our layer boundary cropped to the button itself, and we can't see that drop shadow. But we did have to crop the layer boundary in order to align it. So sometimes you may want to add the drop shadow before you crop it so you don't have to keep going back and forth. Let's go back up to Layer and select Layer to Image Size, and then Command or Control and the letter F to add that drop shadow. Let's do the same for our Buy Now text. Let's go up to Layer and select Layer to Image Size, and then add the drop shadow. Okay, let's go ahead and crop the layer boundary again, Shift plus C for both, and then let's group these into a new grouped layer. All right, so let's go ahead and align this to the background. So we're going to make our selection with our rectangle select tool, and then with our alignment tool, select it, and we want to make sure we have selection selected, and then align center of target. Okay, let's go ahead and deselect. Okay, now that this section is done, we have one last thing left to do, and that is to put everything in a new grouped layer. All right, let's go ahead and get started on the next section. The next part of our web design project includes this section right here and the footer. Now this section here pretty much looks like this section here, it's just reversed. So instead of watching me do this step by step, which I've already shown you how to do for all these different elements, I would like you to go ahead and take on this part by yourself, and then we'll go ahead and finish up with the footer and discussing the mistakes made throughout the design. Now, before you do that, let me just give you a couple quick tips on how I would do this. So to make it as quick and easy as possible, I would take this grouped layer here and I would duplicate it. I would then update the grouped layer with a new name that represents that particular section, as well as renaming any other layers as needed. And then I would take the grouped layers and move them over to the right, and then the right column over to the left. And then I would update that content accordingly with the proper titles, text, and images. So go ahead, pause the video, work on that, and then we'll finish up with the footer when you come back. All right, let's go ahead and increase our canvas size so we can finish our web design. So we just need a little bit more room for the footer. Let's go ahead and go up to image and select canvas size. Let's make it 4000 for the height. And let's also grab our background and resize it with Shift plus S. Let's type in 4000. And now let's create a new layer for the footer background. And then we'll go ahead and create that background with our rectangle select tool. But first, let's make sure we have rounded corners turned off. Let's go ahead and create a size of 1440 by 75. Make sure the position of it is exactly where you want it. And then for the color, I'm going to do a dark color, which is actually this one right here. And then let's go ahead and fill that in. All right, let's grab our text tool and add our copyright notice. Let's go ahead and align this where it needs to be. And let's also use our rectangle selection tool to make a selection so we can align it top to bottom. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do my privacy policy and support links. I'm just going to move these over a little bit. All right, let's grab our social media icons. I'm going to select all four, click and drag to my document, and then they will be added to their own layer automatically. Let's go ahead and move them down into the footer. I'm not really worried about the order. We just want to get them down here, and then we're going to align them along the top of each icon. I also want to distribute an equal amount of spacing between each icon. So I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. Let's grab our alignment tool and click on the first icon. Then hold down your Shift key and click on the other icons. And then we want to make sure we have relative to first item and select align to top. Now to distribute an even amount of space, we can use these options down here under distribute. Now, if I go ahead and try and apply that, what it's doing is it's actually stacking all of the icons on top of each other. So it's not really distributing the space between each icon. So in order to do that, we need to tell GIMP how much space we want between each icon. So by default, it's set to 0. If we type in 50 and then click on Distribute Horizontal Centers of Targets, it will apply an even amount of spacing between the icons. How cool is that? I love it. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and put these icons in its own grouped layer. Now let's grab our move tool, turn on our guides, and let's go ahead and move these over into position. And let's also align it top to bottom of the footer. Let's grab our alignment tool. Let's also make sure that our links over here are aligned as well. All right, I want to go ahead and move these links over so it's aligned to the right side of this column. So the last thing we have to do is we need to crop our canvas now because we have too much space down here. So let me show you how we do this. We're going to zoom in here. So to figure out where to crop our canvas, we're going to place our mouse cursor right here at the bottom of the footer. Now I think we've talked about this before, but if you look down here, there's some numbers. And right now it's showing 3, 3943. So 3943 is the number I want to use to crop my canvas. Yours may be different depending on how you spaced out the different sections of your body. So just remember that number, then go up to Image, select Canvas Size, and then type it in for the height. Okay, let's go ahead and save our document, Command or Control and the letter S. And we are all done with our GIMP web design tutorial. Well, almost, because as promised, I want to share with you some additional pro tips before you give this web design proposal to your clients. So if you're ready to learn all about that, let's do it. Even though we are done with the web design project, there's something that I like to do before I show it to my client or before I hand it over to the design agency if I'm working with an agency or if I'm working with the developer directly. And that is, I just want to step back for a couple of hours at least, sometimes more. I'd like to sleep on it if I can, because when I come back, I will notice things that I missed during the design process. And I want to fix these issues before I hand that off to the client or the agency or whatever the case may be, so that those mistakes aren't seen by my respective employer or the person I'm working with, because it's going to make me look unprofessional. So one of the things that I would do for this particular project that we haven't done yet is we need to make sure that everything is grouped together properly. We didn't do a grouped layer for the footer. So we want to make sure that we are naming all our layers properly and that everything is grouped accordingly so that our clients or the web developers will be able to access exactly what they need in order to do what they need to do with the design. If we leave anything out and the web developer has to contact us to find out exactly what we meant by a specific type of layout, then that's just going to cause headaches for ourselves as well as the web developer. And if you're working directly with an agency or directly with the client, again, that's going to make you look unprofessional because you didn't take the time to do everything properly before handing off the design. The other thing I'm going to look for is any other type of mistakes I may have made in regards to alignment and spacing. I want pixel perfect designs and I want pixel perfect alignment. So I think we did a pretty good job in the header and the hero section, as well as this first section for the body. Or did we? Well, what I like to do is I just like to go back and turn on my guides and just visually look to make sure everything is properly aligned. So it looks like we did that. I think we did the right amount of spacing at the top and the bottom here because we did center this content directly with the background. So I don't think that's a problem. And then we have our rave reviews. So I didn't update the images or the content here. We have some duplicate content. The same with my content up here. So personally, I would update this with new content, new titles, new paragraphs, so that everything is different and it shows that we took the time to pay attention to those small details. So those are little things I'm going to do to stand out from the 300,000 web designers on Upwork.com, which I showed you at the very beginning of this GIMP tutorial. You have a lot of competition and you need to make sure that you're doing the little things to be a much better designer than everybody else. You want to separate yourself from everybody else. Now, when I come down into this section, I'm starting to notice some bigger mistakes. And we can see that in the content. So our content isn't defined directly in the columns right here. The title and the paragraphs exceed these 4 columns on either side. The same with the image. It's not confined to these columns here. So to me, this is sloppy design. We want to make sure that we contain all our information within the grid system that we're using. That way, everything aligns with it properly. So even though I didn't use these 4 specific columns in other parts of the design, maybe in the future I will add something that will align with those 4 columns. But even then, even though I'm not using these 4 particular columns in this side of the document, I am using it on this side because it's a direct mirror, or it's a reversal of this design layout here. So I want everything to be perfectly aligned and equal so we have great designs. So what I would do is I would come in here. Let's grab our move tool. Let's select pick a layer, a guide, and then I can click on this image. And then with my scale tool, Shift plus C, I can then scale that image to be confined to those columns right here. And then I would just need to realign everything so it's directly in the center. Now, as far as our text here, I'm going to use my text tool to select that paragraph, and then I'm going to resize the text box so it fits within those 4 columns. The same with my title up here. I'm going to go ahead and adjust this accordingly so that it aligns directly in those 4 columns. Now, when I do that, I lose some of that content. So I'm going to bring this part of the paragraph down. Then I'm going to select all, and then I'm going to come down to the tool options and center it to make it look a little bit more appealing. And then, of course, we need to also move this particular paragraph as well because it's too close to the title now. So what I would do is I would directly center this between the top of the button and the title here. So those are just some little things I think we can do to improve the design of the web page, as well as make the overall document much more professional before we hand it off to the web developer or our clients. Now, there are some other things I think we can do to make the web page design even better as well. But I want to know what you think. What do you think we can do to make this web page design even better? Let me know what you think in the comments below so we can continue learning about how we can create better web designs. I hope you enjoyed this GIMP web design tutorial. And of course, if you want to continue your learning, you may want to consider my 17-hour web design master course, which includes 7 more GIMP web design projects. So there's a lot more information that I can share with you through this premium course, and it's only $10 US at this time. The price may change in the future, so this is something you may want to take advantage of now before there's a price increase. Also, if you have any questions about this particular project we just worked on, please leave your comments below, like this tutorial, and share it with your family and friends. Thanks for listening, and have an awesome day.